Tennessee School of Law. Her website reveals that she has a real passion for helping individuals, communities, and mindsets thrive. She did a fantastic job on last night. I think she struck the fear of God in us on last night when she told us that if you don't have that durable power of attorney, what is it, medical, that healthcare document that your loved one could be, my daughter could be in the hospital and they wouldn't tell me anything that was going on. And I can just envision me turning hospital units out because nobody will tell me what's going on with my daughter. But if you don't have the documentation, you will find yourself in a difficult place. So thank her for that information on last night. I'm certain that she's going to tell us something tonight that we didn't know and we need to know. So come on, let's give the Lord some praise for Sister Shannon Wilson.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please, if you don't mind. Anyone that wasn't here last night or if you didn't bring your worksheet from last night. So I want to do a little bit of review. Last night we talked about things that everyone needs while they are living. Does anyone remember what 2 documents I said everyone should have in place while they're living? Right, a healthcare document and the power of attorney. Which one of those was for finances? Good. Which one was for healthcare? All right, kind of speaks for itself, right? So last night I also said, in addition to having documents in place for while you're living and planning for the possibility of becoming incapacitated, everyone should have documents in place to plan for passing. And there's 2 main documents I want to talk about tonight. One is a last will and testament, or a will. And the other one is a trust, right? Everyone doesn't need a trust, but everyone should have a will in place. So let's talk about what a will is. A will is your opportunity to say publicly, this is what all I have, and this is what I want to happen with everything that I have when I pass away. All right. Is there anyone in here that collects something that they're willing to admit to? What do you collect? Coins. What kind of coins? All U.S. coins? All right. And what do you want to happen with those coins when you pass away? You don't cash? He said if he doesn't cash them in, he doesn't know yet, right? But bottom line, somebody, when you pass away, has to figure out, what do we do with these coins? All right, I'll tell y'all a story from a show that I watched called My Super Strange Inheritance. Anyone seen it? All right, so My Super Strange Inheritance, the particular episode that I was watching had 2 different people. So the first person was a woman, and she had been a collector of Barbies. That was kind of near and dear to my heart because I, too, have a small Barbie collection. So this woman collected Barbies. She had 2 daughters. And when she passed away, she did not have a will. And her daughters had to go through and figure out what to do with everything. So it came to the Barbies. And her 2 daughters had 2 completely different things in mind for the Barbies. Because her 2 daughters grew up with 2 different experiences with those Barbies. One daughter was like, oh, I love Mom's Barbies. I love to look at them. She kept them in a curio cabinet. And I remember going shopping with her and getting the Barbies. And she really loved the Barbies, and she really wanted them. And she knew that there was some value to some of them. The other daughter, on the other hand, said, you can throw those Barbies in the trash for all I care. I don't want anything to do with them. And her reason was because she remembered being a young girl, going shopping with Mom, and she wanted a blue dress. She was very descriptive. I want this blue dress. And I asked my mother for this blue dress, and she said, no, we can't afford it. Then she went around the corner to the toy store and bought a Barbie. So this daughter, she just had a bad taste in her mouth from mom's Barbies. So since mom died without a will, they had to go through the whole probate process. And probate, by the way, is the court that oversees what happens when somebody passes away. Most probate courts do wills and estates, they do marriage licenses, they do gun licensing, all sorts of things like that. So they're at the court and they're trying to value mom's estate. Why is the value of the estate important? Anyone know? Taxes, right? Uncle Sam wants to get their part. Now we're here in Georgia. In Georgia, there are no state estate taxes, meaning your family does not have to pay taxes on the value of all of your stuff when you pass away. All right. Here in Georgia, there are also no state inheritance taxes, meaning when you pass away, if you leave something to someone that has a monetary value on it, they will not have to pay taxes on that. All right. However, anyone that has assets more than $11.8 million still has to pay federal taxes. All right, I digress. So let's get back to the Barbies. So these girls had to get the estate valued. And remind me, I'm going to ask you to remind me to talk about Michael Jackson. All right, so they had to get the estate valued. And the estate came down to her shoes and clothes and trinkets in the house and those Barbies. That was really all they were worried about. So they had an appraiser come in, and this woman had some Barbies that were like original, first issue, still in the box, plastic never touched. And then she had some that were, not as significant. So when they valued them, many of those Barbies were like thousands of dollars for one Barbie. What do you think happened with those two daughters? They fell out. Why? Because the one who saw the sentimental value in them didn't care about the monetary value, and the one who saw no sentimental value, all of a sudden, she's like, oh, aha, you mean those Barbies are worth something? All right, so they had to figure out what to happen with that, with those Barbies, right? What did I tell y'all the name of the show was? My Super Strange Inheritance, right? You said coins. That's not really strange. A lot of people have coins. Like I would say probably every other person I do a plan for says, oh, I have a coin collection, right? But those Barbies, some people would find that strange. Another person on that same episode collected model trains, right? And he had two sons. It was really kind of interesting how they did this. He had an entire room full of model trains. The sons disagreed on what to do with them, but ultimately they decided we're going to donate these trains to the museum. Donate. What does that mean? Give it away. That meant they got nothing. They didn't care about the sentimental value of those trains. They didn't care about the monetary value of those trains. They just wanted to be done with distributing dad's stuff. And I use the word stuff lightly. Why? Because we all have different layers and levels of stuff, right? When I asked who has a collection of something, I saw one hand go up. I know there's more than one person in here that has a collection of something, right? What do you collect? Ships. Like full-size ships? Model ships? Did you build the models yourself? You just buy them already built. See? And who likes your ships in your life? So what's going to happen with the ship will sail, right? What is going to happen with them? So all of those sorts of things normally go in your will. I want my nieces to get my Barbies. I want so-and-so to get my shoes and clothes. I want so-and-so to get these handbags, and this person gets these handbags. And I want this person to get my firearms, and I want this person to get my fur coats, and this person to get my furniture. And oh, don't forget about my dog. What would happen if I passed away right now? Like things that we go through everyday life and don't think about. when you pass away, someone now has to think about all of those things. All right? So how do we manage so that whoever that is that has to think about those things is not out of their minds trying to do it, right? I like to tell people, put it in place while you're living, while you are of sound mind, so that when you do die, and remember last night, 100% of us are going to die, right? So that when you do, your loved ones, your family, your friends, whomever, can grieve without having to worry about the business aspect of your death. And all of that I'm just talked about is the business aspect of your death. What happens? All right, so back to the will. And don't forget to remind me about Michael Jackson. Back to the will. So the will is your opportunity to say publicly, this is what happens with all of my stuff when I die. Why do I say publicly? Because after a person passes away, that legal document is filed with the probate court. And the probate court says, yes, executor, and your executor is the person you name to distribute everything. You have our permission to distribute everything. Publicly. What makes it public? Because once that document goes to the probate court, now it is a matter of public record, and anybody can get a copy of it. All right? Remember, last night I asked y'all to close your eyes and imagine getting hit by a bus. All right, tonight I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. All right? And I want everyone in here to imagine what is going to happen with your most prized possession when you pass away. Keep your eyes closed. Now I want you to imagine what happens with that one thing that you might have in your house that nobody else knows about, and now you're gone and somebody finds it. Open your eyes. I saw lots of giggles. Right? What happens with that weird thing that you have in your house that nobody knows about, and now you're gone and somebody has to go through and distribute things, and they found it? They found it. They see it now. All right, what happens if that's listed in your will? Because the will becomes a public document. And now the nosy neighbor goes down to the probate court. They pay $250 a page, and now they have a copy of your will and see everything that you have and know who's getting what. Most people live their lives privately while they're living. They want that to continue into their passing. So they don't want the nosy neighbors and the cousins they haven't spoken to in 20 years knowing that, the coworker is getting your coin collection. All right? So the will is a public document. Anyone can get a copy of it. All right? I might step on some toes and cause some anxiety with this next part, and my apologies, but it's reality. All right? The will becomes public, and that means anyone can see it, including creditors. I call them creditor predators, because they often do something like this. What is your name, sir? Mr. Cobb. All right, so they Visa, all right? They have people on their payroll. It's their job to cross-reference the obituaries with people who owe them. So oftentimes it goes something like this. Hello, Mr. Cobb? He said hello for those of you that can't hear. Hi, my name is Shannon, and I'm with Visa. How are you? I'm great. Mr. Cobb, I was reading through the obituaries, and I noticed that your cousin Bob passed away, and it listed you as his next of kin, right? And your cousin Bob, did I say Bob? Your cousin Bob owed us $5,000. And since you were listed as his next of kin, you now owe us that $5,000. What do we do to ensure that we get that payment from you? Y'all can't see how he's looking at me. Right? But that is exactly what happens. All right, Mr. Cobb, they couldn't see the look on your face, but it looked something like this. Right? What are you going to say to them? Wrong, probably not, because he's already said, yes, this is Mr. Cobb. Right? What are you going to say to them? Before you came to this workshop tonight, some of you might have been scrounging to figure out how to get that $5,000 to give to Visa. But you are not responsible. That's why I'll call them creditor predators. They prey on people's lack of knowledge. They prey on the fact that people have passed away. And they prey on people being in a situation where they're grieving. Nobody makes good decisions in an emergency situation. Nobody makes good decisions when they're grieving. What do you do? Great question, Mr. Cobb. So what you do is you say, I don't think that's right, and send me something in writing. And then when they ask for your address, say, oh, but you called me, you should have that information. Okay? You're not responsible for that. The only way Mr. Cobb would be responsible for that would be if he was a co-signer or a co-borrower with Visa on that account. Otherwise, that debt dies with you. There are some debts that die with you. There are some debts that die with you, all right? And there are some that do not. It's easier for me to tell you the ones that do not, all right? The one debt that does not die with you, and I'm looking directly into the camera, is child support. Child support does not die with you, all right? Mr. Young, this is where he comes in. Why? Because family courts nowadays are requiring the parent, the non-custodial parent, or whoever has that child support obligation on them, they're requiring them to have a life insurance policy in place. Because if that parent that had that child support obligation dies when that child is 4, how is that child supposed to live until they're 18, 19, 20, whatever the state age is? Right? That child support obligation does not go away. So the courts are requiring people have that life insurance policy, and they do the math. Right? If your child support obligation is this month per month, and this is the age of the child, and you have that obligation until they reach the age, that debt does not die. All other debts, student loan debt doesn't either, right? Student loan debt does die with you. Why? Because most people do not have a co-borrower or another authorized person on student loan debt, right? That's good debt to have. You ever heard of good debt? That is good debt. All other debt, what happens when those Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or whomever, when they start calling, tell the people there's no money to give you. There's no money to give you. They negotiate. They'll say this month, how much did I say it was, $5,000? All right, they'll call back 2 months later, or they'll send it in writing. Oh, sorry for your loss. We'll take $2,000. And then they don't hear from you. And then they send another letter. Sorry for your loss. Our condolences. We'll take $1,500 to erase this debt. Eventually, it's going to go down to 0. And what it ends up being is a write-off for them. Okay, so don't get all wrapped up in those debts. So I'm going back to the will. Can they sue you? They cannot sue you, but they can sue the estate. Okay? Or they can try to sue you. When people always ask, can they sue you? The answer is always yes. Anyone can sue anyone. They might do it incorrectly, but what they should be doing is suing the estate, right? And they make a claim against the estate. And I see you, just a second. And that's why probate is important, because when you file an action in probate court, now what you're doing is you're telling the world this person has passed away, and you're giving the court the opportunity to say to creditors, to creditor predators, and anyone else, This person has passed away. Now's your opportunity to come forward and say they owe you. All right? Yes.
He did not want to talk about what to do if he died. My grandmother had just passed maybe 8 months, and it made me say to him, Dad, what should we do? What do you want if you pass away? He didn't want to talk about it. He did not want to talk about him passing away before us or before my mama. So he passed away with nothing in place. Also, everybody can testify to this. He had some brothers and sisters that were strong personalities. But I became the executor of the estate. I was not in the profession that I'm in now, so I did not know anything about what you just mentioned. So he had a vehicle. And as soon as I called them, because I did not want my mother to lose that vehicle, so I called them and explained to them that he had passed away. And they stopped everything with that vehicle. And I always wondered why. It went to a whole different department. But I ended up paying off because I did not know. I paid off the sum of the vehicle. Also, and they would not give me any information on the vehicle. And also, he could have put credit life on the vehicle, and I did not know whether he did that or not, and they would not give me that information. But also, in order to become the executor of the state, like she said, I had to go to the courthouse and the probate. I was lucky that my siblings and my mother signed off on me doing that with no problems. But I also had to put the announcement in the newspaper. And I also had to take it to the bank, and they would not have let me do anything with the account had I not had that.
Correct. So, did everyone hear what she was saying? Without going through probate and without having the legal documents in place, they're not going to give you any information. Right? We can also go to the life insurance policy. Right? If you're not the named beneficiary on that policy, Mr. Young, are they going to give you any information?
No, that's on your seventh wife. You might want to go. I've been there. When all 3 wives show up, number 2 is still named there.
That's right.
Number 1 thought they were, and number 3 thought they should be.
Yes.
There's nothing that can be done.
There's nothing that can be done. And he's talking about 7 wives. How about, especially in our community, we all have those play cousins. Or, oh, that's Billy's baby boy. And everybody's taking care of Billy's baby boy. But when it comes down to it, Billy's baby boy is not on any documents anywhere. Right? So if you have those friends, family, play cousins, loved ones, whomever it is, if you want to and you intend to care for them in some way, make sure you have the documents in place to do so. One of my saddest cases is exactly what he just said. I had a probate case where man had been married twice. He passed away at church on a Wednesday afternoon for the deacon's meeting. Okay, at church. His wife was his second wife. She was sitting at home with his lunch, ready for him to come home. And instead of him coming home, she got a call from one of the deacons. We need you to get here. Okay, by the time she got there, he was gone. And then his first wife and he never had any children. He did not have any children. She did not have any children. But he had a play daughter that he had raised, right? And he had put his first wife on a life insurance policy. He never changed it, even after she passed away. And he put that play daughter on one of his retirement documents. His new wife, they had been married for about 15 years. She was not on anything. She was not on anything, and he did not have a will. Okay? So having that will in place is key. All right, contrary to television, contrary to movies, there is not a requirement that there be a reading of the will. They do that for our viewing pleasure. They do that for ratings, but it is not legally required. Also, a will has different parameters and rules and regulations in different states. Here in Georgia, yes, we do take holographic wills, and a holographic will is one that is handwritten. However, with a capital H, even if you do a handwritten holographic will, it still has to be witnessed by two people who are not named in the will. If I leave everything to Mr. Cobb in my will, Mr. Cobb cannot be the person that witnesses it. Okay? So the will, they have different rules and regulations in every state. All right, anyone in here ever heard of Aretha Franklin? All right, does everyone in here know that Aretha Franklin, they thought she died without a will? All right. She had been gone for about 8 months. They had already named an administrator on her estate because they were proceeding as if she died without a will. And she had 2 adult sons that have special needs, are going to need care and attention the rest of their lives. And she did not have a will. About 8, 9 months after she passed away, administrators going about their business of trying to distribute things and adjust the estate. And let's not forget, she was in Michigan where the estate taxes were 25%, right? They found 3 wills, 3 handwritten wills. One of them was in a spiral notebook in the cushion under the couch. Okay, not 1, not 2, but 3 wills. Now, these wills didn't contradict one another, but they all said something different. So they had to stop what they were doing. They had to verify those wills and make sure that that it was authentic, that Aretha actually did so. All right. What were you supposed to remind me? Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson did have a will. However, it took them a while to find it, 1. And then 2, his estate value became large, like large. Michael Jackson died in 2009. They just finished settling his estate about 2 years ago. Okay, why? Does anyone know what Michael Jackson, his largest asset was at the time of his passing? It wasn't Neverland. It wasn't his demos. It was the Beatles catalog. Who said that? It was that Beatles catalog. All right, he had bought the Beatles music. All right, and so when he died, they valued Neverland Ranch. That was basically nothing. Right? His music was really nothing. Right? But that Beatles catalog was where all the money was. Why did it take so long for them to settle his estate? 1, because his will didn't address that Beatles catalog. And he also had a trust, which we'll talk about. But 2, remember I said anyone with assets of $11.8 million has to pay federal taxes? So who do you think got involved in his estate? The IRS. So while the administrators of the estate said it's worth this much, the IRS said, oh no, it's worth this much. So they had to value it and say, okay, they met somewhere in the middle, right? But even celebrities, and I could stand up here all night long and talk about the celebrities that passed away without wills, but we don't have all night, right? And oh, by the way, many of them look like you all, look like us. Michael Jackson, Prince, no will. Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther, no will. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, no will. Bob Marley, no will. Okay, I could go on and on. So the will, again, it's the public document. It's where you say, this is what I have, and this is how I want all of those things distributed. when I pass away. Remember our puzzle we talked about last night? Your will is your opportunity to paint that picture and put the pieces in place. So everyone needs a power of attorney, everyone needs a healthcare document, everyone needs a will. But there are some people that also need a trust. All right, yes.
So you said there's no public reading of the will.
Correct.
So the person who has it in their possession, they just get it and handle the business, or how's that?
So that's a great question. So the question for those of you that couldn't hear and for those of you online was, I said there's no public reading of the will, so does the person that has that will in their possession just get it and start handling business? Not necessarily. Why? Because the person who has the physical will might not be the person that's named as the executor in that will. So what should you do? You should communicate with the person that you have named as executor. I named you as executor on my will. And this is where it is at the time when something happens to me. All right? That does two things. One, it gives her the opportunity to say, oh, no, I don't want that responsibility. And two, now you've got another person that knows. Three, this is probably the most important one. Remember I said don't let Google be your guide? Don't let Google be your guide. What that means is there's somebody out there, like an attorney like myself, who drafted that will. Right? And so they know what's in the will. They know where it is. They know what it says. Right? You can change and edit and update your will as long as you're sound mind and living. So this week, I'm leaving everything to my nephew. But next year, when my nephew messes up, and like Project says, not calling, not checking on you, well, you're not getting anything. I'm going to change my will. Can I do that? Yes. No. Correct. Google cannot say, this is where this will was. You can go to places like Office Depot and buy a will kit. I don't recommend them at all. I don't sell you. Google is not the be all that ends all with this, right? It should be someone who knows the ins and outs of the document and the language and the things that should be in there. For instance, Georgia is the only state in which you can disinherit your spouse. Do I need to repeat that? Georgia is the only state in which you can disinherit your spouse. What does that mean? That means I can say, when I pass away, my spouse gets nothing. How do I do that? It has to be in the will. You can't just say, well, that's what I wanted. It doesn't work like that. All right? It has to be in writing, and it has to be a legally sound writing. It has to be correct. Okay. Because Georgia is the only place that does a lot of things. Okay? In every other state, the spouse is entitled to what's called an elective share. Okay? An elective share means I was married to this person and I am automatically entitled to 1/2 or 1/3 or whatever it is in that state. Many states it's 1/3. Right? But Georgia, even with that elective share, if you wrote it in your will and your will is valid, then your spouse can get nothing. All right? Now, many times are there other ways to take care of that spouse or not? Yes. Like sometimes they'll make the spouse the beneficiary on a life insurance policy. That's what you're getting and nothing else. All right, so there's ways to do it. Remember, we talked about it's a plan. You have to be strategic in all of it. Yes. So, with that life insurance policy, whoever the named beneficiary is who that company is going to contact, right? If I call and say, well, he passed away and I was married to him, I should get everything. No. And they're not going to, if you're not the beneficiary, they're not going to tell you who is.
You're not the owner. So again, my wife is a successor owner. My brother is a successor owner of my life insurance company. Why? Because if something happens to me and I can't represent myself, I want them to be able to call that insurance company to make sure premium paid. We'll make sure it's still enforced. I don't want to leave here and not get what I've been paying for all this period of time. So either power of attorney or making sure that you have joint ownership on those contracts. Because if you call me and your spouse is sick, you don't have power of attorney, you don't have ownership of that contract, I can tell you it's active. I can't tell you much more.
Right. Right. And that's what he's talking about is while you're living. But after you pass away, who can make a claim on that policy? Only the person that's the beneficiary. They won't tell you. So if wife number 2 is not on there and they call, they're just going to say, I'm sorry, you're not on this. I can't give you any information. Yes. Two witnesses and a notary. If they've written a will and it has no witnesses here in Georgia, it has no witnesses, it has no notary, then that person might as well have died without a will, because that will is not going to be considered valid, and the court is going to say they died intestate. Intestate means without a will. All right? So 1, make sure that it is properly drafted. Make sure that it is properly witnessed. Make sure somebody knows that it exists, and make sure you're keeping it in a safe place. All right? And if you edit it or update it or change it, make sure you either destroy the original or that edit and update addresses the original and says, and these are my changes. Everything else remains the same. That's called a codicil. A codicil. All right? So many people, somebody over here had a hand raised? Okay. So the will is what everyone needs. But there are some people that could also benefit from a 4th tool called a trust. All right. Contrary to popular belief, a trust is not only for the rich and famous. A trust can be for ordinary, everyday people like us. And it should be used, probably more important for us. All right, so what is a trust? A trust is a legal document that we put in place. It is a private document. Nobody sees it. You don't have to divulge the contents of it. All right, and in that trust, you say, I want my shoes to go to this person. If they pass away before me, they go to this person instead. I want my house to be sold, or I want my house to be turned into a rental property, and the income from the rent can go to send my grandchildren to college. What is that? What's the buzzword for that? Anyone know? Generational wealth. Why? Because I just set up something for my grandchildren. I don't even need to have children yet. And I can do that. All right. My life insurance policy, we make, and Broderick, you may want to chime in on this. What we do, we make the life insurance policy, we make the trust the beneficiary. All right. Instead of me naming Sally as the beneficiary, I make the trust the beneficiary. And then I say in the trust, this is what happens when I pass away. Pay for my funeral first, pay off the house, and then divide the rest between these 4 people. Now your funeral is paid for with that policy, no mortgage. Somebody is now getting a house free and clear with no mortgage on it, right? And all of these other people are now set. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And two, I like to say keep your values for generations to come.
Correct. Correct. Because otherwise, if you have that policy in place, and I name Sally as the beneficiary on that policy, and in my head, I think Sally is going to pay for she's going to do everything that I just said. But Sally gets that money and she goes on a trip around the world and does everything but what I thought she was going to do. Do I have any control over that at that point? None. None. Sally might not even pay for your funeral. Okay? So have it in the trust document. You outline, this is what I want to happen. All right? Everyone does not need a trust. There are 4 categories of people I always recommend a trust for. All right? The first category of people I always recommend a trust for is anyone who owns real property, which is houses and land, whether there's a mortgage on it or not. All right? Whether there's a mortgage on it or not. Why? Because now what we do is that deed changes, and the deed is the piece of paper that signifies ownership for real property, right? If there's a mortgage company, the mortgage company wants to know, okay, if this person passes away, how's this mortgage going to get paid? All right, don't be misunderstood. If you pass away with a mortgage in place and that mortgage does not continue to get paid, or you haven't set it up so that someone can assume that mortgage, the house is going to get foreclosed on, whether it's in a trust or not. All right? And also, don't get confused thinking that just because you have a trust, it's going to be generating its own income. That is not how it works. We put income-generating assets in the trust, but the trust by itself is not going to make money. All right? So, again, the first people I always recommend a trust for are people who own real property, which is houses and land. Can you have, just a second, I see you. Can you have more than one property in a trust? Yes. If I have property here and property in South Carolina and property in Florida, can they all go in my Georgia trust? Yes. If I own property jointly with someone else, can it go in my trust? Yes, if they sign the deed saying so. If they don't, then only your interest in that property can go in there. If you own property with 10 cousins, because that was grandma's property, that means you have a 1/10 interest. All you can put in there is your 1/10 interest. All right, and so many times, especially in our communities, this is how we lose land. All right, so the object is not to lose land. Yes. Debt dying with the person, mortgage debt does not die. All right, it does not. If you have to pay property taxes, that does not die. No. That's right. That's right. Mortgages do not die with you. That mortgage company wants their money. If you want to keep that house in the family, somebody needs to be paying that mortgage. All right? If you want to keep that house in that family, someone needs to make sure those property taxes are paid every year. Especially if it's a house that doesn't have a mortgage on it. So many times we get all happy, paid the mortgage off, and we forget that, well, you still got to pay those property taxes every year. Okay, I had a client here recently who paid cash for lots and lots of property in the metro Atlanta area. He thought he was sitting pretty on all of this property, and I had to divulge to him the unfortunate news that he had liens on all of his property because he had not paid his property taxes. And he said, but I own that property. I paid cash for it. Yes, you did. Very good. But you also have to pay the property taxes. All right? So first people that should have a trust is anyone that owns real property, whether there's a mortgage on it or not. Second category of people that I always recommend a trust for are business owners. All right? Business owners. Why? Because being a business owner comes with certain heightened level of attention and detail and rules and policies and procedures. Okay? Sorry, I'm going to keep picking on you, Mr. Cobb. Would you like to go into business with me? What kind of business are we going to have? Houses. What are we doing with these houses? Which one? Both? Renting houses. So we're in a rental business for houses. All right. So let's shake hands. We're business partners. Now I'm going to go out and I'm going to sell and rent all of these houses, and you're over there. You following? Everyone following? And I'm making all this money, and you're over there. And then I die. I'm not going to kill you off. I'm going to kill me off. All right? I die. What is your family going to say? Where's my money? And what is my family going to say? He didn't do anything. We weren't partners. But we're business owners. So now all of a sudden what I made could be depleted because his family is going to come after it, and my family is certainly going to fight against it. And now we're going to spend my entire estate fighting in probate court over who gets that business. Whereas if I have a trust and I leave that business in my trust and I say when something happens to me, this is what happens with my part of the business, it's in the trust, and an independent, a trustee is administering it, that, and they get to go to both of our families and say, nope, this is what happens with it. Okay? So business ownership brings with it a whole other level of information and duties when it comes to your estate. All right? Another big part of that is whether or not both of us have a power of attorney. Because if he's the one that gets hit by the bus and I'm the one doing all the work, well, nothing happens. But if I'm the one doing all the work and I'm the one that gets hit by a bus, can he, as my power of attorney, go in and start doing things? Yes. All right, so remember we said all of these documents talk to each other and work together? Just example after example. So the second category of people who need a trust are business owners. The third category of people that I always recommend a trust for is anyone that has assets that can best and more strategically be transferred outside of the probate process. That is basically anyone that has a bank account or a life insurance policy or a retirement account or stuff or cars or houses, anything that you have that you don't want the probate court to have to be involved in, right? Then you should have a trust. Right? And then the fourth category of people that I always recommend a trust for, it's got three parts. One is anyone with minor children. All right? Anyone with minor children. Why? Because when you pass away, those minor children still have to be cared for. And how do we do that? Legally. And are there documents associated with that? Yes, there are. So anyone with minor children should have a trust, because also in that trust we can do crafty and creative things like every year on their birthday they get $500. Or the trust is here for them to go to college. Right? I had a friend in college, and she was Caucasian, and all I knew was that her father had passed away when she was 14. But I also knew that every time anyone wanted to do something, she would say, oh, I don't know, I have to ask my trustee. And me being young and uninformed and uneducated, I had no idea what that meant. I went through 4 years of school with this girl thinking that there was some ominous trustee out there, and there was, right? And after I started practicing this area of the law, I found her on Facebook, and I reached out to her, and I said, just can I ask you some questions? I remember when we wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and you said, oh, I don't know, I have to ask my trustee. And I remember you had a really nice apartment off campus, and you would say things like, well, my trustee pays the rent. And I remember when you were getting married, and even though your father wasn't here, you had a really nice wedding. Can you explain this trustee thing to me? And she said, sure. My father died. I miss him every single day. I always have. But he had a trust in place for me and my siblings, and we were taken care of monetarily. He had a life insurance policy, millions of dollars. In his trust, it said that we got certain amounts as we reached certain ages. We got certain amounts for what's called health, maintenance, and education. We got certain amount for our first wedding. None after that, first wedding, right? You can put things like that in there, in the trust. Okay, so minor children, anyone with minor children should have a trust. The second part of that fourth category is anyone in a blended family should have a trust. Let's face it, blended families now are more traditional than traditional families. All right, that whole yours, mine, and ours, oh, I love you, I love your kids. Wait until that person dies. They make movies, Lifetime movies about that, right? The second wife comes in and swoops up everything, and now her and her kids and her family or whomever get everything that you work so hard for with whomever. So anyone in a blended family should have a trust. I see some of y'all chuckling, but it's true, right? And then the last part of that one is, quite frankly, anyone with an interest in leaving a legacy. If you have even the slightest bit of interest in leaving a legacy, putting that puzzle together, you should have a trust, because a will just by itself is not going to do it. It's not going to do it. All right, I'm going to tell you all how much time do I have? 10 minutes? Or am I over by 10 minutes? Oh, okay. So I'm going to tell you all a story about a colleague of mine. And she tells this story very proudly. So her grandmother had a life insurance policy. And her grandmother had bought this policy from one of those door-to-door salesmen. $20,000 policy. All right, and those of you in the back probably have heard this same story and probably know this person. $20,000 policy. And she was one of, my colleague is one of 10 grandchildren. So in grandma's will, she said, this is who I've named as the beneficiary on my policy, and this is how I want it distributed. You, granddaughter A, are the beneficiary. When you get that $20,000, take $10,000 and pay for my funeral, and then each of my grandchildren get $1,000. All right, grandma had it right. My friend paid for the funeral. She took her $1,000 and she gave each of her 9 cousins their $1,000. Okay? Her 9 cousins all spent their $1,000 within 2 weeks. She took hers, she invested it, and now she has a $1 million company. 6-figure company. All right, 7-figure actually. Every time one of those cousins wants something, who do they call her? They call her. And every time she takes great pleasure in saying no, Grandma put us all in the same situation. She gave us all the exact same opportunity. Grandma had a will. She gave them all the exact same opportunity. Grandma had a plan. She had the will. She said what she wanted. She made her wishes known. She had a policy that would support what she wanted, right? And she named somebody that she knew would follow it, follow those wishes, all right? A will by itself is no good if you're not naming somebody that will follow your wishes. A trust by itself is no good if you're not naming a trustee to manage it after you pass away according to your wishes. There are some rules and laws, and they're called fiduciaries, but I'm not going to get into all of that. All right? Everyone needs a will. But when you have a trust in addition to that will, now the language in your will changes, and it says, basically, I leave everything in my trust. So now those nosy neighbors and cousins and whoever that wants to go down to the probate court and get a copy of the will, they don't see what all you have. They don't see the Barbie collection and the watches and the coins, and they don't see all of that because it's not listed in the will. Instead, it's all listed in the trust. All right? There's different types of trusts: revocable trusts, irrevocable trusts, life insurance trusts, charitable trusts. There's all types. Right? And everyone doesn't need the exact same trust. Just like everyone doesn't have the same assets, everyone doesn't have the same family structure. We structure it according to your wishes, your goals, your concerns, what you want your estate puzzle to look like. All right? Any questions about a will? Great question. So the question is, if you're a witness on the will, do you need to read the document, or are you just witnessing it? You are only witnessing it. You are witnessing, saying the person who wrote the will is of sound mind, and they know what they're signing is their will, and you and the other witness watched them sign that will in the same space, same time, and everyone knew and understand, and you are of age to be a witness. Great, good question. Any other questions about a will? He said if you were to do a will, what should you put in a will and what should you not put in a will? Essentially, any asset that you have, anything that you have that you want to pass on to someone else should go in there. Right? If you have a trust, though, those assets are now not specifically listed in the will. You say, I'm leaving everything in the trust. And then in the trust is where you outline all of that. But a basic will, you can put everything in there. The shoes, the clothes, the handbags, the firearms, the vehicles, even the vehicle in the back under the tree that has a cover on it and hadn't been moved in 28 years, right? Why? Because that's got a tag or a title or something associated with ownership. So anything that you own that you want to ensure that someone else gets upon your passing, it should go in the will or in the trust. Everyone needs a will. Everyone needs a will. Everyone needs a will. There are many people, especially those in those 4 categories, that can also benefit from a trust. You have a will. If you have a trust, you also need a will. Okay? I'll give y'all one last example. Celebrity example. Any basketball fans in here? Yes, no, maybe so? All right. So let's talk about Kobe. All right. Oh, now I'm a fan when I say Kobe, right? So Kobe and Vanessa Bryant engaged in estate planning, very similar to the planning I've been talking to you all about. They had their powers of attorney, they had their health care documents, they had their wills, but they also had a fabulous trust. All right, and in that trust, they named each other as trustees, they listed their minor children, they only had, they didn't have the youngest, was not born at the time they put their trust in place. In their healthcare documents and in their powers of attorney, they had agreed that they would never be on airplanes at the same time together. So they agreed on that early in their marriage when they started having children. We will never fly together, right? They named each other as powers of attorney so that they could be in help with finances. But more importantly, in their trust, they outlined everything, including business assets, right? Endorsements, all of those sorts of things. So when Kobe passed away, Vanessa was able to go to the probate court and say, may I adjust our trust? Yes. Why? Because the document itself allowed that. May I adjust the trust and name our baby girl who was not born yet? Yes. Why? Because the document itself was drafted in such a fabulous way that it allowed her to do that. Okay? May I continue with this contract and this contract and this endorsement and this endorsement? Yes. Why? Because the trust allowed that. All right? So they engaged in estate planning. It was fabulous. Things have gone on that might not have been, would not have been able to carry forward if they didn't have that trust in place and if it hadn't been drafted in such a fantastic way. All right? So yes, there are lots of celebrities who got it wrong by not engaging. When you neglect a plan, you plan to neglect. But there are just as many everyday people who get it right. And they plan and they do so strategically. It's kind of like chess, right? I don't know how to play chess, but I do know it's a game of strategy. All right? You do so strategically so that your families, your loved ones can carry forward. Many times they carry forward your legacy because you have given them the blueprint. Right? You can't build a house without a blueprint. You can't leave a legacy without planning. Yes. Yes. He didn't even finish asking the question. He started saying, do you recommend having a lawyer for thee? And I just said yes. Why? Because all of these documents, they talk to each other. And it should be someone, like we were saying last night, it should never be someone that's a fly-by-night attorney that does A, B, C, D, and O. My night job is I do this, right? I do this all day, every day. I love what I do. And it should be someone who knows and understands how all the documents talk to each other and how they work together and how if I do this, it's going to impact this policy over here, or it's going to impact this part of the plan, or it's going to impact this part of the documents. So, yes. All right. Everyone in here, everyone that has participated is entitled to a complimentary consultation with me. My information is in the flyer. Right? I do not do cookie cutter planning. If you have even the slightest question, ask. All right. Any other questions? Did y'all have fun tonight? I'm sorry, the kids, did you have fun tonight? Okay. All right. Thank you.